Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, arts and features editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Dave.
How you doing, Dave?
Pretty good. We've got an action-packed week. You guys sent me a bunch of stuff, so there's definitely, we're just going to tease a little bit of some of the exciting things going on this week. Why don't we just dive right in, Thad? Why don't you tell us what is on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, this week we have another installment in freelancer J.A. Savage's ongoing coverage of what is going on at the decommissioned Humboldt Bay nuclear power plant. And folks who read regularly will remember that she wrote some months back kind of a story that kind of sounded the alarm bells about exactly how secure that site was and just how kind of dangerous what the vaults at the decommissioned nuclear plant, what they contain and how dangerous it is. And the kind of stunning, I would say, lack of long-term planning for a highly toxic substance that has a half-life of 100,000 years or something like that.
Something pretty amazing, and it's like really close to the coast. Obviously, that's the big takeaway here for folks who don't know. That's where the power plant is, and that's where the decommissioned nuclear rods are. So one of the things in this article I just want to just throw out there, hopefully people can check it out for themselves. There's a really cool graphic explaining, I'll let you go for it, but explaining, just how close it really is and what the magnitude of that short distance is.
Yeah, so the title of the story is 44 feet, and it's also the title or the name of a group, a kind of a coalition of folks who have come together to try to address the situation and come up with kind of long-term solutions. But that 44 feet is a reference to how high these vaults are above sea level in King Salmon. So they're just on the edge of Humboldt Bay, and 44 feet, as this wonderful graphic made by our production manager, Holly Harvey, illustrates, is not that high. It's, as Jay Savage notes in the article, I think it is 7.5 Guy Fieri's if you stack them on top of each other, spiky hair on top, foot
with
spiky
hair, right? It's like
with hair, yes,
with hair,
sure. And then it's about half the height of the tallest point of the Humboldt County Courthouse. So, I think most people think 44 feet, not too high, but when you're talking about, what separates, spent nuclear fuel rods from Humboldt Bay, it seems like not that great a distance. And so Jay's story really kind of, like I said, progresses on her previous reporting and really focuses on this group, 44 Feet, which was started by Jennifer Marlowe, a professor at Cal Poly Humboldt, who's concerned about the situation. And now the group has grown to include a whole variety of scientists from Cal Poly Humboldt, as well as representatives from County Board of Supervisors, California Coastal Commission, PG&E, and a number of other entities who are all kind of talking about forward planning for the site, and especially, making sure that things like sea level rise, which seemed like a much more distant possibility when these decommissioning plans were approved, just 15, 20 years ago, than it does today. Basically sea level rise is happening at a rate well beyond anything that PG&E or anyone else projected a couple decades ago. And so there's a real fear that some of the engineering assumptions that were made on how to keep this material safe for, again, not just 1, 2, 10, 100, but thousands of years into the future, that those assumptions may no longer hold or be relevant to kind of the current situation.
And so in this working group, or the description, they're tasked with something that no other community in the country has really been able to deal with, which is a long-term solution for radioactive waste. So that seems to be the driving, energy behind why they're meeting. But what the article goes through a whole bunch of the technical issues that we're faced with. What do you think some of those takeaways were? That the items that are being brought forward for attention to consider.
Yeah, so there's obviously kind of like short-term immediate concerns and then much longer-term concerns. And one of the immediate concerns is just how this site might withstand a real subduction zone event, earthquake, and ensuing tsunami on the coast. And there are proposals that would, there's ideas being thrown around. I wouldn't even say they're proposals at this point, but looking at ways to kind of shore up the bluff, for lack of a better term, but the shore line along the vault, to make sure that it's less susceptible to erosion, but then more importantly that there's something there to kind of break up the thrust of a tsunami event if it should come. And then, as you alluded, there's kind of no national strategy on the longer term for dealing with this type of nuclear waste. There had been plans when decommissioning started to move it off-site to a site in Nevada. And, kind of unsurprisingly, folks in Nevada were like, wait a minute, like, we don't want this stuff here. And there's been kind of a federal paralysis about kind of finding a national site, a repository for all of this toxic material from nuclear plants around the country. And there's even kind of a growing questioning of whether that's ethical, whether that's morally acceptable. I think Jen Kalt from Humboldt Baykeeper is quoted in Jay's story of kind of saying, like, maybe we shouldn't be looking to another community to take our toxic waste. Maybe we need to figure out something to do with it here. Maybe that's the, kind of the just outcome of this. So, at this point, there aren't a lot of tangible solutions or plans that are being considered. This is really a working group that's just trying to gather information, trying to brainstorm, and trying to look at the different, kind of levers of power that can be, that can actually push PG&E and the community toward finding a solution. And because, the nuclear plants fall under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Federal Nuclear Power Commission, and both of them at this point have kind of deemed this site done. They're going to return every couple decades, to monitor and make sure and test and make sure that, nothing's escaping kind of, but they think the plan is solid and they're kind of leaving it alone. And so the only kind of local body or quasi-local body that has any jurisdiction over this power plant is the Coastal Commission, which basically is tasked with making sure that it's on kind of solid footing and can, I think as Jay terms, make the permitting process kind of a regulatory hell for PG&E. And so it seems like the Coastal Commission is really intent on putting as much focus on it as possible to make sure it wields all of its authority to make sure the site is kind of as secure as possible. But really, it's an ongoing conversation, and it's something that I don't know. I mean, we're probably going to be writing about it for a long time, and if the journal is around in 1,000 years, I would imagine it's still going to be writing about the situation. And before we switch gears, I want to put in a quick plug that the group is holding on October 13th at 7 p.m. at Synapsis in Eureka a community discussion about the situation. And so folks from 44 Feet will walk the community through, the current situation, PG&E's ongoing plans, and then also kind of the myriad of concerns that have been brought to the table.
That's awesome. Yeah, you anticipated what I was going to ask you. It's great for people to have an avenue for getting involved, and it's even more important to know that there's a meeting coming up in a month or less, almost a month to the day. Yeah. So thank you so much for covering this critical issue for our community, and I'm sure, like you said, there's an awful lot of conversations and discussions yet to come.
One last thing before we switch gears, I just want to put in a plug for Jay Savage, not to be confused with Jen Savage, different people.
Yeah.
But JA has been covering and reporting on this nuclear power plant specifically, but kind of nuclear energy as a whole for decades, and just brings a phenomenal wealth of expertise to the issue, and I think has really been a reason that this is kind of at the forefront of community focus right now. So I just want to give her kudos before we move on.
Yeah, mad props. The article was information dense, so I definitely recommend people check it out. Okay. Well, yeah, let's pivot to what else are you covering this week on the news beat?
Yeah, so I wrote a short story about Kyle Zoellner's civil trial against the city of Arcata, or civil case against the city of Arcata, moving toward trial. And so um, Kyle Zoellner was the suspect arrested back in April of 2017 on suspicion of having murdered David Josiah Lawson at an off-campus house party near the now Cal Poly Humboldt campus. He was pretty quickly released from jail after charges were dismissed because a judge found insufficient evidence to hold him to stand trial. He essentially continues to be the only suspect that has been named in the case, and the murder investigation to solve David Josiah Lawson's killing remains ongoing. But in the aftermath of his arrest, he filed a lawsuit against the city of Arcata alleging that the police hadn't had probable cause to arrest him, defamed his character, denied him medical treatment, and engaged in a malicious prosecution of him. And so over the last, I think he filed it some months after his arrest. So it's been about 5 years since the case was filed. And in that time, judges have whittled away at the case, finding that many of his allegations either weren't supported by fact or the law, and dismissed them. And so now only one remains, this claim of malicious prosecution. And it's scheduled to go to trial next month. And it focuses hinges almost entirely on one police report. And so folks who have followed the case closely might remember that detective for the Arcata Police Department at the time, Eric Losi, filed a police report right around the time Zoellner was charged. And the police report stated that there was an eyewitness. There was somebody who said that they saw the stabbing and they had identified Kyle Zoellner as the man who stabbed David Josiah Lawson. When the case went to preliminary hearing, Eric Losi said for the first time publicly that, oops, that was a mistake. And the witness actually never identified Kyle Zoellner. They claimed that they saw the stabbing, but they did not identify Kyle Zoellner as the suspect. That was a huge part of the reason the case fell apart at preliminary hearing and didn't go to trial. And Kyle Zoellner is alleging that Eric Losi did that intentionally, that they knew, that the police department knew they didn't have enough to get a charge against Kyle Zoellner, and so they kind of fabricated that report. Eric Losi has said that it was a mistake. So that's kind of the thrust of the case, and it just got this kind of very weird curveball thrown at the 11th hour, which we're not sure kind of what it means. But in order for Kyle Zoellner to prove, to win his claim against the city, he needed to prove that that Eric Losi filed that false report, B, that he did it maliciously, that he knew it was in error and did it anyway, and then C, that that's the reason Kyle Zoellner was charged for murder. And so he needs to hit all three of those points in order to win his case. And during her deposition just last month, District Attorney Maggie Fleming said that, in fact, that report wasn't at all the reason she filed a murder charge against Kyle Zoellner, and that her decision to charge him was on a totally unrelated, or not totally unrelated, but a totally different report on forensic evidence in the case. And Kyle Zoellner's attorneys kind of freaked out and said, we don't even have this report that you're referring to, and alleged the city is kind of trying to do a trial by ambush, and there's all kinds of cross allegations. And now the Kyle Zoellner's attorneys are saying they need to depose Maggie Fleming again. Have asked for sanctions in the case, and it's kind of a mess, and it's unclear if it's going to actually go to trial on October 3rd.
There's a lot packed in there.
There's a lot there.
But the big takeaway is that upcoming trial that was about to start in just a few weeks may be delayed because of these complicating factors about the evidence that would be required to move forward.
At this point, we only really have Kyle Zoellner's attorney's take on it, but she certainly raises some very potentially important questions about the district attorney's honesty in her handling of this case and her public statements and all of that. So I encourage folks to read the full story and then also check back for updates that will surely be coming.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for your hard work and clarity on this really complicated issue.
Dave.
Jen, what is going on the arts and features beat this week?
This week we have a really great art beat piece from L.L. Kessner. And it is about, we've written before about this artist, Jesse Weedle, But this time it's a kind of a different project in a different place, also at Synapsis. Everything is happening at Synapsis.
Yeah.
So I do like to imagine, though, that the public meetings happen with, like, aerial performers overhead and whatnot. But anyway, Jesse Weedle has an exhibition there of some paintings that I just really enjoyed L.L. Kessner's discussion of them, and also interview with Jesse, because he kind of talked about his inspiration for the pieces and how he's come up with them. And one thing that Kastner pointed out was, and I tried it looking at the pictures, when you look at Jesse's images, which are, if you've seen them around, you'll recognize them. You might not know his name, but there are lots of pictures of people who are down on their luck, but not particularly looking Dust Bowl sad, just sort of sometimes cruising along on like a child's bicycle, or making chaos near a trailer park, setting something on fire, a giant monster looming over teenagers. And everyone is very ruddy, and it's sometimes like Jesse, I love you, but I can't look at these for too long. In the same way that when I see someone with a sunburn, I'm like, ah. And Kessner points out that these are like, everybody's flesh looks really cooked. As if like everybody looks kind of like an almost finished ham. They're very ruddy, and everybody just looks like hell. They're just exhausted, bug-eyed, very like methed out. Troubled times are happening. But when you put your hand over the people and kind of look at the sky or the background, it's really beautiful. It could be your meditation image for the day. It's like beautiful clouds, sunsets. Where is Bob Ross? What's happening? And then all of a sudden, when you take your hand away again, now we're looking at the police blotter. Now all kinds of grim stuff is happening. And honestly, the week that I was looking at these paintings, I also went through the Fortuna and Ferndale police blotters, and two of the things in the paintings were happening in town. So I was like, okay, I can't even say these are sensational. This is actually just taken from life. But what Jesse said was that the people in the paintings are people who've stayed at the party too long, is sort of how he described it. And the show is called 7-Day Weekend. We've all been there. Who among us? And, he points out figures like Keith Richards and Iggy Pop, who have that kind of raw, exhausted, hard living vibe. Does Iggy Pop own a shirt? It's been so long. He's so rich. Someone get him a shirt. It's got to be cold sometimes, Iggy. But this kind of exuberance is in the paintings. And I really appreciated L.L. Kessner's discussion of this, because I had always looked at them as so grim. But there is sort of a wild-eyed joy in the people in the paintings that I really had not examined before. And then, Kessner describes driving home one day and seeing a couple of guys crossing, 96, in sort of homemade white robes, hauling some stuff, and just like looking straight crazy, and thinking, this could be a Jesse Weedle painting. And I think if you're familiar with his work, you'll walk around and you'll be like, oh, this is like full Jesse Weedle painting. I think I've had a conversation with someone who was like, I was looking for an apartment, but I got there and it was like a Jesse Weedle painting. I had to go.
It's a part of speech now.
Yeah, it really is. But, I appreciated hearing from him and what he thinks of them, and sort of his process for putting them together, and, what he's trying to get across. And it's really great to see, and I urge everyone to do the hand test, to look at the background and then look at the people. There are sometimes aliens in them. There are sometimes just random people. Sometimes there's cops. It's a really mixed bag of things that are very, very familiar and things that are wild sci-fi material. People who you could easily see on the street might be floating. So it's a great show to see, and I encourage everyone to go check it out. Oh, and the last time we talked about Jesse's work, it was posted outside of a place that was frequented by people who use drugs and sell drugs illegally. And it was kind of a purposeful juxtaposition of the paintings and the environment, right? And one of those paintings got stolen off the wall, which, that's what happens when you put up art outside in Old Town that isn't nailed down, or that's not nailed down enough. But a painting from this show has also been stolen from Synapsis, which the light-fingered Jesse Weedle fan base out there, settle down. The man's an artist. He's got to work. He's got to pay for paint, etc. And, just, I'm sorry if he painted something and stole your soul. But you've got to return that. It's ridiculous. So more art theft in the Jesse Weedle world.
So this is on display now at Synapse, you said?
Yes, it'll be up for a few more weeks, although the Synapsis folks were vague about how long it would be. They extended it because it was popular and they wanted to have more opportunity for people to see it, but you have to make an appointment to go see it. So probably because of all the stealing.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that, because I definitely want to check it out.
Go enjoy and don't take nothing.
Right. What else you got going on the Arts and Features beat this week?
Simona is experimenting with, surprise, surprise, roasted vegetables. She is, I'll tell you something funny. The story is titled End of Summer Joy and Goat Cheese, but I initially forgot to put the hyphens between end of summer, and our production manager, Holly Harvey, freaked out, and she was like, the end of joy? The end of goat cheese? What are you doing?
Oh.
We had to fix that. It is not the end of joy. Well, and it's not the end of goat cheese. So it is, in fact, the start of new goat cheese, because the folks at Cypress Grove sent Simona samples of 2 new kinds of goat cheese to check out. And so she tried them. She liked them. So she made a couple of recipes using them. And she also has some fun suggestions for serving. One is what is it? It's Meyer lemon and alfalfa honey. So already I just want to eat that like it's ice cream.
Totally.
And then the other one is hatch chili, for those of you who like a little spicy. And so she's got a great eggplant and tomato roasted vegetable thing to get that last bite of, farmer's market in the summer flavor with goat cheese. And I strongly recommend you making it. And she's got a couple of suggestions for serving, as I said, one including stuffing a pear with goat cheese and sort of putting it in the oven until it gets warm.
Yum.
Why don't I just go to her house and eat? It's ridiculous. And then what else do we have? I wrote a very goofy piece this week about the very bad cat. The bad cat is back in our Seriously column. And this time he is demanding that you stop being so divisive.
He's supposed to bring people together.
Right? I don't know if you've noticed, but in the news in particular, there's been a lot of people talking about how we shouldn't be divisive when doing things like prosecuting people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th and tried to do some treason. The idea that, defending your basic human rights, etc., is divisive. Asking to be treated like a normal human being, asking to be allowed to live your life, is super divisive these days. So I kind of took that to the cat's vibe, and at least the one cat that I've really lived closely with would have been absolutely down with that sentiment and criticize you for being divisive, for example, by complaining that you've just been slashed across the arm, that there's cat crap everywhere, or that they've pooped in your shoe. That bringing those things up is hurtful, and it's not unifying.
So when I was first reading this, I was trying to figure out, like, is this your alter ego coming out? And like, but what was the angle? Like, what was the most clever element of it? And then I realized, aha, this cat is a terror, but it just wants to know why you just keep calling it out.
Right? Stop pointing out things that I've done to injure you is divisive.
Yes. Touche. I thought that was great. Well, it's very clever. The prose there is really, I had to read it out loud to people because it was that good. But I recommend that people
I'm glad
check
you
it out.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, straight up.
I hope your cat is not like this.
Thankfully, I don't have a cat. I love cats, but not for me. Thanks. Well, that was great. We covered an awful lot today. Thad and Jen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's about all the time we have this week. North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed. Also available online 24/7, so you can check them out anytime. Thank you out there for listening, and thank you guys again for joining us. And take care until we connect again next week.
See you next week.